everyone, welcome to TechFerment. I'm Raj. I welcome you all in Backend Development Bootcamp of Day 1. So I'll talk about myself. My name is Raj and I'm Google Developer Expert for Web Technology and Firebase. And also I'm leading GD Jalandhar community in Punjab region. And here we are at TechFerment. So as a TechFerment as an initiative, we are providing a video tutorial on the various web developers technologies like PWA, Firebase, Google Cloud Platform, or maybe JavaScript, Bootstrap, and many more things. So let's start it with the backend development of day one. So as you know, as a backend developer, we can create, or backend developer also called as server-side development, where you have to work on the specifically server, mainly web server, and then we have to work on the database part. So backend developer basically write the business logic about the front end. So like we as a front end developer, we can create a UI with the help of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And there, for example, there is a button, let's say login with Google or login with email and ID, this kind of button. So whenever user will click on this particular button, so as a backend developer, we have to write that particular business logic for checking the user authentications, whether the user is uh, logged in or not. So you can do that with the help of backend development strategies. So as a backend developer, we have to create a REST APIs, you have to write your custom business logic, you have to manage the database, you have to manage the server. There are a lot of things as a backend developer you have to do. So like if you want to start your career in the backend development, you have to know about the basic code languages like JavaScript, Node.js. So if you have a experience with JavaScript, you can go for the Node.js and JavaScript as for writing your backend business logic. Or if you are working on PHP, so you can also start your backend you can write your business logic with the help of PHP. Or if you're working on Python, you can start your business logic with the help of Python. And similarly, we have a framework for respective to these core languages. Like if you are working on JavaScript or Node.js, so we have a framework Express.js. With the help of Express.js, you can create robust applications, scalable application with the help of Node.js and Express. And the next, like if you are working on PHP, so we have a framework, let's say Laravel. This one is the next level is Laravel. Or if you're working on Python, so we have a framework Django. And there is a one more language which is also called as Ruby language, which is most popular in UK side. So we have a framework Ruby on Rails. So you, with the help of Ruby on Rails, you can write your custom business logic, or you can create a backend business logic, or you can create REST APIs with the help of Ruby on Rails. And these all are the languages. So as I mentioned, like as a backend developer, we have to work on web server part as well as the database part. So in the market, we have a lot of database, like you can go for the MongoDB database, which is a part of unstructured database. Or if you're working on structured database, let's say you have to work on MySQL as a database, which is a example of RDMS, Relational Database Management System. So let's start it with the backend development bootcamp. So as a backend developer, we have to work on the SSR part, like server-side rendering. So like if you are working on a front-end development side, client-side applications. So whenever we are calling APIs on the client side, so but if you are working on server-side rendering, so you have to call these APIs on the server side, servers end, and like from the server we will get the static data or static web page, so that it will be easy to render and it will be easy for the SEO part and the performance part. And as a backend developer, you have to create a REST APIs. This is a basically gateway between the server and the database and the browser. And the third, like as you are working on a database backend developer, so you have to work on the database, like you can go for MongoDB, MySQL, or any other database. And you have to when work as a security, as a backup, you have to do that. And the fifth part is like as a backend developer, you have to work on the cloud integration, and you have a base good knowledge of operating system, let's say Linux or maybe a Windows operating system. So like this is a basic client server architecture. Whenever we as a client means the browser, whenever we open a website, let's say google.com, so there is a request goes to the server, and server will check if there is any file or not. So if there is any file, server will send the data to the browser, with the help as a response or as a response. So like we can send a request from browser to the server. So we can send two type of requests. Let's say this one is file request, like where I can request from browser to the server, hey, I'm looking for an index.html page or maybe about.html page. So server will check I have index.html page or not. If the server having index.html page, it will send the data, that particular file, to the browser, and browser having a rendering engine that will render your HTML, CSS, JavaScript code into the UI part, and then you will be able to see the website. Next one part, you can also send these HTTP requests. So with the help of these HTTP requests, you can perform some CRUD operation in the database. So there is the REST protocol, or you can say REST request. So we have a GET request. We use GET request for getting a data from the database, or we use POST request for adding a data into the database. We use delete request for removing the data in the database, and then we have a two requests, update and put. These two requests are working for modifying the data into the database. So as I told you, these HTTP requests like get, post, put, delete, and update request is also called as REST APIs. So what is a REST APIs? REST APIs stand for representational state transfer. This is a full form, and we can send we can call the APIs. We have some URL, and then we need to use some HTTP protocol or a request. Let's say get request, port request, or put request. So this is example. Whenever I'm calling GitHub user APIs, so my user APIs path is apis.github.com/users, and my request type is get request. So this is an example for getting a data from GitHub user, and this is a get request. So whenever I type this particular URL into the browser, or maybe the API testing tools, let's say Postman or Swagger. So what is the behind the picture? Like this request goes to the server, and server having a computer with the web server and the database. And in the computer, let's say they have a file index.js, and there is a logic written in JavaScript file. The URL, the logic or maybe function is /user. So if the URL will be /user, so we need to send the data. We need to collect the data from this database, and then we need to share the data to the browser. So this is the logic. So this is how the APIs is working. So as we as a browser will, or maybe we as a client, send a request to the server, and server will check the parameter in the functions like the URLs, let's say users or maybe user/id, based on URL parameters or URL name. So it will call the functions in the backend logic. So we have a REST APIs, let's say get request, put request, post request, delete request, and update request. So I'll give you the example. Let's say I want to create an API for getting a data about the users. So my request will be get API/user. So this is a standard example for getting a data of users in the database through the server. So this request goes to the server, and server will give me this particular response, like this is a response array of objects, means the JSON file. So we have a name, ID, and these all are the name and ID as a JSON data as a response. So for example, if you want to get a single user data, so we need an ID. So we need to pass the ID through the URL. So this will be the request when I want to read the data. So that's why we have to use get request, and the path will be API/user/I the ID, or maybe you can pass the one. So I need to get the user details whose ID is 1. So this will give me this particular response. And similarly, if you want to call the APIs for modifying the data or update the user, so I need updated data and the IDs for which user we need to update the data. So your request will be put request, and the path will be API/user/1, means I want to update the user 1 data, and this is a modified data, and I'm passing this data to the server, and server will update the data, and this will give you this particular response, like your name will be updated. Okay, and then we have a delete request. You can also delete the data into the database. So you have to call this APIs or REST APIs. So request will be delete request, and the path will be API slash user slash one, and this will give you the response, means the user has removed. And also you can create a user. So for creating a user, we need to call post request. So we have a post request, and the URL will be API slash users, and then we need to pass the data, and this request goes to the server, and server will give me the response like that user is added, and the ID of this particular user is 6. Okay, so this is a these all are the requests. First one request is get all the data about the user, and get single user data whose ID is something maybe 123, or maybe alphanumeric ID. Or if you want to, third one is if you want to update the data, so you have to use put request, and then this will be the path, and then you need to pass the ID. And the fourth one is for deleting or remove the data. So we have a request, delete request, and the path will be API slash user slash ID. And the post, we use post request for adding the data into the database part. So we have a path API slash user. So as a backend developer, we have to create these REST APIs. For example, this is example for the users. So you can create a similar APIs for the products, like API slash products, that will give you the all product details. Or if you are calling the API get request API slash product slash ID, so this will give you the product, the data whose ID is you are passing this particular ID. And you can use these tools in the market, like you can go for Postman or Swagger for testing the APIs, let's say get request, put request, or put request, or any other request. You can do that with the help of Postman and Swaggers. And this, in this particular tutorial, I will use Postman for calling the APIs or testing the APIs. So I'll start now. I'll talk about JavaScript part. So as a backend developer, we will use JavaScript and Node.js as a language for writing our business logic, or maybe backend logic, or REST APIs. So what is JavaScript? JavaScript is one of the top most popular programming language, and this is fastest growing language in the world. And there are a lot of big giant companies, let's say Netflix, Walmart, Google, PayPal. There are a lot of companies who are using JavaScript for their backend. And with the help of JavaScript, you can create interactive application for as a backend front-end engineer. Or if you're working on as a front-end engineer, you can use front-end framework, let's say Angular, React, or Vue. So these all are working on the JavaScript as a concept. So this is a great opportunity to learn JavaScript, and we can implement these JavaScript concept in the backend. So what you can do with the JavaScript? So as I told you, JavaScript is one of the most popular programming language, and you can make interactive web page with the help of JavaScript as a front-end engineer. But there are a lot of things, like with the help of JavaScript, you can create mobile application. Also, you can create web applications, let's say Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. These all are the example for the web applications. Or you can create a mobile application as well. So like there is a framework, let's say Ionic, React Native. So these all are the framework. With the help of these framework, you can create mobile application. And similarly, with the help of JavaScript, you can create real-time networking application. And the third one is you can create command line tools with the help of JavaScript. Or even you can create, with the help of JavaScript, you can create real-time games. So next part is, where does JavaScript code run? So like in the front end part, we have talked about whenever you are running a JavaScript code. So we have a JavaScript file, so we have to add that JavaScript file into the HTML code, and then you need to run that HTML code in the browser. And each browser have their specific rendering engine. And for running a JavaScript code, so we have a JavaScript engine. So in the market, we have a lot of JavaScript engine which is responsible for running your JavaScript code. So if you are working on Chrome, so we have a Chrome V8 engine which is built on C++. Or if you're working on Firefox, we have SpiderMonkey. So earlier we have a limitations, like if you want to run a JavaScript file, so you need to add that JavaScript file into the HTML page. and then you will be able to see the JavaScript code inside the browser. You cannot run the JavaScript code without the browser initially. So that in that particular time, JavaScript is called as client-side language. But after few time, there is a developer name is Ryan Dahl who took JavaScript engine from the browser, and then they have created he have created a virtual environment for running the JavaScript engine, which is also called as Node.js. So Node.js is a runtime environment for running your JavaScript code without the browser. So so overall, with the help of JavaScript, you can run your JavaScript file without browser, because Node is having a own rendering engine. So rendering engine name is Chrome V8 engine, and there is a layer of C++ code, and these layer is called as Node.js. So with the help of Node.js, it will give you the environment where you can run your JavaScript code. So that's all from my end, and the next video I'll talk about the JavaScript concepts and the Node.js, how we can use Node.js. And yeah, thank you so much for watching, and see you in the next video.